All right. Hello and welcome back to Real Seekers. I'm your host, Dale, the Real Seeker. And today I am joined by a special guest, Stephen Edwards. Hey, Stephen, how are you?
Hey, good morning, Dale. Good to be here. Thank you for having
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, great to have you on the podcast. I think I think it might have been your publisher sort of reached out about coming on the show to speak about you've got a new book coming out, and I think we want to kind of get to know you a little bit and speak about the book and then also have kind of a discussion about our respective beliefs and Christian apologetics. So just I think the thing to do just before we kind of get into the topics, do you want to just kind of introduce the audience as to who you are, a little bit about your background, and if you're comfortable sharing, maybe a little bit about your own faith journey as well?
Sure. Yeah. Well, talking about who I am, sometimes I'm not really sure, Dale. But anyway, you see, I like to kid around a little bit. But yeah, so I was born in England, right? So I grew up in a little town of northwest of England called Blackpool. Um, and I'll try and keep this succinct because we could talk about where I'm from and what I've done in my life for a long time. But I grew up in, what I considered as a child a pretty traumatic childhood. Now, I know most people can say the same thing. I get it. I'm not here to measure my traumatic with somebody else's, but that's my perception of what it was like, right? And so all I wanted to do as a young boy was run away from home, which I did a number of times, but they kept catching me and bringing me back. But my point is, all I wanted to do was get away from home. And I spent most of my life running away. Now, I didn't realize it as a young boy, obviously, but I am my home, right? And I was running away from myself. I was running away from my past. It was too painful to look at. And so, the analogy I make, I don't know if you have ever seen this before, sometimes your dogs get out and for whatever reason they start chasing cars, right? They don't even know why they're chasing the car, but they're chasing the car, right? And sometimes the car might stop, right? And then they run into the back of the car. It's very painful. So they start running the other way because they're running away from the pain, right? And so that's what I did for most of my life. I ran away from my pain. I grew up, the school I went to was a Christian school. And every day we went in and we read the Bible and we played hymns. And so that was my background growing up. For whatever reason, maybe just in my nature, I'm a rebel. I don't know. But I didn't necessarily believe in what I was learning. And during my younger years, I had some what I would call spiritual breakthroughs. But at the time, I just thought I was crazy, which turns out later that I am crazy. But anyway, and I had these ideas in my head, right? And not necessarily a voice speaking to me, but some kind of awakenings, if you like, that I didn't necessarily believe, but I heard in my mind, and I thought that makes sense. So, for example, I'm going to this school and they're talking about the Son of God and Jesus. And at one point, I had this thought in my mind: the Son of God is the Son of God. It's the Son, not a person, right? So we personify things in our minds because it's easier for us to understand. And so when you look at, the stars, the sun, the stars. You look at the astrological signs, there are 12 disciples, 12 um, star signs, whatever. So I started to notice some of these things, and then later on, I studied it a little bit more. Anyway, at 16 years of age, I was actually put in a mental asylum. So you've got no need to worry. I am crazy, right? So, but it was very traumatic for me, right? As you can imagine, right? So I had an episode of mania, and I know you know what that is, right? I was as high as a kite, and I wasn't taking any drugs, right? I was just as high as a kite, and I loved everything, Dale. Everything was just wonderful, right? So anyway, obviously I was crazy and they needed to treat me and get me back down. That's their perception. And as I look back, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I might have been actually sane and you guys might have been insane. But they pulled me down using drugs, right, until I was completely depressed. And then they let me out because they said I was normal. And I go, hold on a second. Wait a minute. How does that make any sense? Anyway, that's what happened there. And so I spent my life being ashamed of that, because I don't know how old you are. You're quite a bit younger than me, probably, but when I was growing up, mental illness was frowned upon, right? You were less than, right? If you had that. So I spent most of my life being ashamed of that and hiding it from people that I knew, people that I loved, the people that loved me, because I felt like if they knew that, they might see me in a different light and therefore maybe even be afraid. I don't know. But this is, of course, I'm making all this up in my head, right? None of this is necessarily true, but this was my story, right? And we all create a story about our lives, right? No, I didn't know that as a kid either, right? I thought, no, this is true. This is what's happened. And you really believe in your story, right? So it wasn't until later in life when I studied with, other people that had a little bit of a more interesting overview of life that it's just a story and we can make up whatever story about our lives. But the story we have about our lives determines the quality of our lives and how we live, right? So it's very important. Okay, so and then I got into the personal development arena. I had a business. I had a lot of businesses. They all failed, right? So I wasn't very good at business, right? So uh, I came across a guy. I'm sure you've heard of him, Tony Robbins, right?
Yeah.
This personal development guru. And I had lost another business, and I was going through a divorce, and so I had to think about, what do I want to do when I grow up, right? I'm not sure I want to grow up, but what am I going to do next, right? So I went to a seminar. A lady friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm going to go to Tony Robbins, and I've got some tickets. You want to go?" And I said, "Well, it's funny you should say that because yeah, I do. I just bought his audio program, right? Like millions of other people, and I think it's pretty good. So yeah, I'd like to go." Anyway, I go to see Tony Robbins as a guest of this friend, and I'm watching him on stage, and I go, I want to do that. I want to be a speaker like him. Of course, all masters make it look easy, right? You don't know what you're getting into, right? So I set about getting to go work for him, which is a book in itself. I mean, that was insane what happened. But miracles and magic happen, right? So I ended up working for Tony Robbins and immersing myself in the things that he teaches. And through him, I got introduced to what I would consider to more spiritual teaching. I don't know whether I'm sure you're familiar with people like Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, and those other James Redfield, Neil Donald Walsh, all those people, right? And I was more interested in that than the personal development side, but I realized the value in both. So I left working with Tony and I started my own mind, body, and spirit events, helping people overcome their limiting beliefs, helping them overcome their fear, and identify what you just said, who they really are, right? So they can be authentic. Well, I was doing that. I did that for quite a long time, and I was really good at it. But what I wasn't doing, Dale, was working on my authenticity, right? Being who I really am and facing my own fears, my own shame, right? And so, as I believe, the force, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, stepped in and said, okay, it's about time you face yourself, right? You got good at helping everybody else do it. Now is the time that you're going to look at yourself. So I was just going through another divorce, right? So talk about repeating patterns, right? Again, right? What's the definition of insanity? I ask that to people. I say, what's the definition of insanity? They say, well, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I say, right? If you look at the dictionary under insanity, there's a picture of me, or at least there should be. So I was repeating these patterns. And anyway, divorce, no matter what, is very difficult. I don't know if you've been through a divorce, but anyway, if you need any help, call me. Right? So anyway, I was depressed and I was sad. I'd also reached a point in my life, Dale, where I was exhausted, right? I was constantly, doing events, helping other people. And eventually you're spent because you can only give so much without giving to yourself, right? Without feeding your own soul, without feeding your own faith. So I burned out. So I'd going through this fourth divorce. I was burned out, and I ended up meeting this incredible, incredible being called Tamaz, who took me on a ride like I'd never been on before, and I hopefully will never go on again. Even though it was an amazing ride, I made the choice to be on the ride and stay on the ride, but eventually it became untenable. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. Hopefully, I haven't taken too long to explain sort of where I came from and how I ended up in this, what most people would describe as a toxic relationship.
Right. Just kind of interested to follow up, and just out of curiosity, you mentioned when you first found out about the spirituality and aspects. Just kind of curious, like what was sort of some of the content of that spirituality? Because I know there are differences, among that type, and what was it that really attracted you to that?
Yeah, the honest answer to that question, Dale, is I'm not 100% sure, right? I think, sometimes I think we all, people say, well, what's your purpose? I think your purpose is what you want to make it, right? I don't think, and this is my belief, I don't think God says you're going to do this or you have to do that. I think we get to choose. We have free will, right? But I think we have an essence of who we are and what we're attracted to. I think that happens, right? So in some way, shape, or form, it interested me, it intrigued me, right? I'm like, what is this? Because obviously, like I said, I was raised with a very different set of beliefs, right? And when you're a child, you don't question things. This is what your parents believe, this is what society believes, this is what you're supposed to do. And I guess I have in my nature, I tend to challenge things, right? Not always just accept them for what they are. So I found it interesting, and the more I delved into it, the more it made sense to me, right? And so let me give you an example of something that I've adopted as a belief now. Like I just said, it's all a story, right? I mean, I don't know if this is true. It's what I believe. Now, if someone showed me something that made more sense, I believe that too. I'm not attached to anything, right? What I feel is important is the truth, right? And now the truth, you see, people say, well, what's the truth? Well, my truth might be different than your truth, right? It's what feels like the truth to you, right? Based on what you believe, what you've been taught, and your experiences, right? So for me, it seemed, like I got this idea that Jesus is the Son of God. It's the Son, right? So what made sense to me, and I can't remember if there's a particular person that said this or if I just thought about it. It's like we all believe in an omnipresent, all-powerful, loving God, right? And that God created us, right? And so when you look at all the things that humans have created, on life, but yet this creator, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, created everything. There's nothing that God didn't create, right? So this God is omnipowerful, can do anything, right? So my question is, why would this creative force send us down here without first giving us everything we need?
Uh,
That would
uh,
seem like, well, why? Why would that happen, right? So everything, I believe, everything we need is within us. So you might say, well, what about the truth? Well, you have mechanisms inside of you that can help you identify whether something is true or not. It's a feeling. Today the slick word, if you like, is intuition, right? People go, what the heck? What the heck is intuition, right? Well, it's a feeling. It's something that you sense. And I believe as we go forward as a human race, I'm going to call it a species, a consciousness, whatever you want to call it, we are going to become more in tune with that intuition, with that feeling inside. Because when we think something through in relationship to having intuition, that's slow. It's very slow, right? You got to think things through, and then you got to, sort through your doubts and your fears, those things. Whereas an intuitive feeling cuts through all that and it makes things faster. And I believe that as a consciousness, we're evolving, and we're evolving to that point where, for example, you look out in the world right now, Dale, you look on, social media, you look on the news, and it's so confusing because you're like, who do I believe? Right? It doesn't seem I can believe any of it. That's true. So where do you have to go? You have to go within, right? You have to go to your creator. And I don't believe we need an intermediary to do that. I believe you God yourself. And unfortunately, if you go through an intermediary, you're probably going to get confused as well because all the, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many versions of Christianity are. I mean, I think there's about 2,000, maybe even three. And you've got all these other religions. It's like, wait a minute. I do believe is the essence of all the religions is the same. Love. It's about love. It's about forgiveness. It's about kindness. It's about being loving. It's about experiencing life. It's about being your authentic self. and understanding that you are a child of God, right? That God doesn't create garbage, right? But we are sometimes conditioned in our childhood to believe that we're not worthy, good enough, right? Um, and we don't trust in ourselves. We don't trust, people say, well, don't trust in your heart because your heart's going to lead you astray. Well, not necessarily. Now it could, right? But it could also lead you to where you want to go, right? So there's a lot of social conditioning that served a purpose at one time, right? It was done to protect us, right? But in order to protect us, our forefathers started to implant fear-based ideas in our mind that caused us to be afraid and to think that we weren't worthy of communicating with our creator, that we needed intermediaries to do that. And so I believe, I talk to God all the time. Sometimes he shouts at me, right? But whatever, right? I have a relationship, right? And it's fun. God can be funny. God's not that, strict guy in the sky that says, you could not do this, you know. He does say if you do that, there are going to be consequences, right? And those consequences can be severe, but we have free will to choose those things. And no matter what we do, God is always going to love us. God is going to love you regardless. It's unconditional love, right? So anyway, I went a bit of a rant there. So what do you
It
what
was
would you like? What would you like to ask?
Yeah, that was great. No, there was a lot of points. I was kind of jotting down some notes about some certain themes and that sort of thing. So I definitely like, yeah, we both fully agree. We have libertarian free will. I think absolutely right. And um, I was also interested. So you do believe in God. I just wanted to clarify. At one point, you did call him. You mentioned God was a creative force. So I'm just kind of curious. Do you see God as a person, like someone that you have a personal relationship with? He's a person in the same way we are, or is he like an impersonal force or something? I'm just curious about what your thoughts are there.
That's a great question. So we're made in the image of God, right? But people get confused. They want to personify that again. So for me, and you heard me say creative force. God is everything. There is nothing that isn't God, right? God created everything from God's self, right? So there's nothing that is separate from that. And now you have people argue with that, go, wait a minute, right? I'm separate. I can see there's a gap here. But in reality, there is no gap because in that space that we can't see, there are molecules, the molecular structure. And so, love transcends all that. And so can you with your thoughts, because thoughts are things. I mean, I ask people, have you ever had a time when you thought of someone that maybe lived in a different country, right? And then suddenly the phone rings and it's them. I was just thinking about, or vice versa, right? Um, so, so that's a little crazy. Well, here's the thing, if God created everything, then God can create anything. So human beings have created what we call a cell phone that you can pick up. There's no wire attached to it, and you can call anybody in the world. So to me, that is a stepping stone for us to realize and accept we don't need that phone. We can communicate without the phone. But that's a big step for most people to go, right? From, having a cord on the phone to having a wireless phone. That was a big step for most people. How does this work, right? Where's the phone line? Where's the cord? So I believe that we're on this journey and a great journey. I mean, which is why it's not a good idea to go to other countries that believe things that we may have believed 500 or 1,000 years ago and try to get them to understand what we believe today. It's too far, right? They can't go that far. And we should not push them into that because we are trying to take away all their experiences that will get them there, right? And so if you do that, there's a good chance they're going to kill you, right? They're going to kill you because they, as a consciousness, are not ready to accept that yet, right? And which is why, when some people challenge the paradigms that we live in here in the United States or in England or in Australia or wherever in the Western civilization, people get scared, right? And then they want to destroy that because they don't want that idea, what that person calls truth, to pull their truth from under them, right? and them not, well, now that's scary, right? Now you're telling me that what I believed all my life is not true. I don't know about that. Put him in prison or find something wrong with him, right? So we're all experiencing that in some way, shape, or form. And so our beliefs are being challenged. We don't want to throw them all out, right? I mean, we've got some great beliefs, right? I believe in love. I believe in human beings. I believe that we want to be able to live harmoniously, like Jesus said, right? He wasn't about bitterness. He never even said create a religion. He just said this is a good way to live, right? So, and if we can live that way, my goodness, what a world that would be, right?
All right, awesome. Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, I can see there's a lot of things that I would love to kind of discuss with you, and some things we agree on, some things we disagree on, and yeah, that's totally fine. But just before I put on my Christian apologist hat, I still want to let the audience kind of get to know you with the introductory questions. And there is something I've been a bad host because I haven't asked you yet. You've written a book, right? The Venus flytrap. It's called Sex, Lies, and Repercussions. So
Yeah.
I want to give you some time before we get into our apologetics discussion. What number one, what is this book about? And what is it that motivated you to write this book right now at this time?
Great question. So, what the book is about. If you look at the cover of the book, and I know you have, right? And you hear the title, it sounds like an erotic romance, which it actually is, but it's so much more. It's about facing your fears, facing shame, facing judgment, and being we talked about it already, being your authentic self, you know? That's the main thrust of it is to accept ourselves because if we can't accept ourselves, Dale, nobody else is going to, right? Um, that we're going to make mistakes. We have foibles. We have flaws in ourselves, And so, to me, number one, having gone through this experience and lived the other way, um, to not be able to face those things, admit them, and ultimately say, ultimately forgive yourself, right? We're all talking about, you got to forgive people, our trespasses against us, all that stuff. But the person we really need to forgive is ourselves, right? For whatever we think we have done to transgress, right? And that's not easy for most people to do, right? It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And partly because we don't necessarily want to own, right? that we did that we did transgress other people, right? Because we want to push that away, right? We don't want to necessarily face that. And that is scary for people, right? But if we can't do that, if we can't, own our lightness and our darkness and our shadow side, then we can never really be free because we're always going to be worried about what people are going to say. Well, if people learn this about me or learn that about me, so they can never find out. So you're always living in fear of that coming out. And then what? Well, maybe my wife or my husband won't love me anymore. Maybe my friends won't be my friends anymore. Maybe my family will reject me. Those are foundational things that we all need, right? And to have to potentially give those things up is extremely scary. Of course, the truth is you won't have to give them up because if they find things about you that they didn't know, chances are they're going to say, okay, well, listen, let me tell you about me, right? Let me tell you about some of my stuff, right? Because we've all got that stuff, right? What do they say? We've all got skeletons in our closet, right? And it's all those things really are, Dale, and I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. They're all just things that really don't matter, right? We're all human, right? And we can do things as a human that most people would judge, right? And as Jesus said, let the person who has walked in my shoes throw the first stone, right? We can, people very easily get in judgment so they can judge other people so they don't have to look at themselves, right? Now, there's a limit to that, right? If someone does something to try and kill you, you can forgive them. It doesn't mean you have to hang out with them, right? It doesn't give you a chance to do it again, right? I forgive you, but I'm not going to forget what you did, right? Um, so those are some of the core beliefs that got me eventually, I guess, into having this experience, which I didn't realize was coming. And when it did, boom, it hit me hard, right? And why did I stay in a toxic relationship? Well, it was also pretty good, right? So I use the analogy in the book. Have you ever gone to the fridge in the middle of the night, opened the freezer, and taken out a big tub of ice cream, sat down on the sofa, and just got into it, even though you know that after you've eaten that, you're not going to feel good and it ain't good for you? And then I say, I hope so, right? So it's okay to go off track sometimes because that's an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself and reinvent yourself in a better way. So I have a belief. I believe that nothing happens to you, everything happens for you.
All
And
right.
like it says in the Bible, you're never given more than you can handle, right?
Oh, so sorry. Well, it was hard to hear what you said.
You're never given more than you can handle. You're never given more than you can cope with, right?
Gotcha. All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So yeah, there's a lot of things to discuss here, and I think I guess a first place to kind of start, putting on my apologist hat. And my goal here, look, I'm not going to be so arrogant. I'm not going to convert you on the spot or something like that. That never works or anything like that. But I hope that by talking to each other, we can give each other, at least a better understanding of the Christian position and get kind of bounce your ideas as to what it is and stuff. And I think the first place where we kind of connect is there is this issue of truth being a paramount. That I think you said that's the most important thing.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, you kind of mentioned for you, truth is sort of relative, right? I have my truth. Somebody has their truth, and that,
Well, here's what I would say, Dale, just to clarify on that.
yeah, yeah,
I think there is some of that that might be your truth, but isn't everybody's truth. And then there are immutable truths.
okay, okay,
So we have gravity. You can't really argue with that, right? So you know what I mean? I mean, so there are fundamental, intrinsic truths that are true
okay.
no matter what your religion is, what your language is, where you live in the world. And I think that is important to understand those to have a life that is going to be able to support you. Because if you don't understand those principles and those truths, your life is going to be a little rocky, right? It's going to be a little difficult because you have no foundation, right?
Can I just ask them, like, why do you think there is a difference? Like, why is truth relative for some instances? I guess like personal religious belief, or I don't know what else you would think, but for other things like gravity, it's objective, it's universal kind of thing. Like, why is there a difference?
Okay, so let's think about 9/11, right? So all these guys got in an airplane, flew it into a building because they believed the truth was that by doing that, they were going to go to heaven and have, I don't know, 100 virgins, right? That was a belief, right? And that was their truth, right? Had you sat them down and said, no, 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 listen, that's not true. They've lived a life believing that, right? You're not just going to turn them around in 5 minutes and say, listen, let me just tell you, let me tell you something. That's not happening, right? They would kill you, right? They kill you, right? So that is not a truth based in immutable scientific or even religious belief, right? Uh, so that's an example of a truth that somebody might believe to be true for them, but it is not a truth that is universal.
So I guess for you, so it's based on the fact that, well, look, there is this disagreement that arises kind of thing, and so it seems to be inherently relative. Um, I guess I would just kind of let me give this kind of pushback and see what you think, and I'll let you have the last word. But if I were to try to convince you, I guess I would say, and hopefully you don't mind. Hopefully this is fun for you and stuff. But
Yeah, yeah.
I would be interested to know, number one, why can't we affirm that there is an objective truth? Because believe it or not, there are people that deny gravity. There are even people
Yeah,
that in
that's
my
right.
field that deny 1+1 = 2.
Yeah.
It's called fuzzy logic in philosophy and stuff. But
Or the world is flat.
or that the world is flat. Yeah, I interviewed a flat earther myself on my show. So, even on these things that we think that you and I would agree are objective, there's disagreement there as well. So I don't think I think it would make more sense to say there is this objective truth, and some people have false beliefs, and or maybe everyone has false beliefs or something like that. but there is still an objective truth out there. Why, like, why wouldn't you be open to just saying that way or seeing it that way?
Well, I don't know that I'm not, right? So give me a give me an example of an objective truth for you.
Well, I think one that you and I would agree, 1 + 1 = 2. And
Okay,
someone can disagree with that all they want, and it doesn't matter. Like that is what the truth is.
I would agree. So give me an example in because one of the clashes that we might have here, the disagreements we might have, what I believe in terms of spirituality, or you want to call it religion or faith, right? What would you say is one that you feel that we believe differently?
That you and I believe differently in terms of religious belief.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it would be so one would be that sin, you said something about what I would call sin. It doesn't really matter. It's just a human thing to do. And you're absolutely correct. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So no human being's better than another, right? But we've all sinned in at least once in our lives, and that makes us equal. But I think where a fundamental difference would be is Christians would want to say, but that's a problem that needs to be addressed. It can't just be, well, that's human, so who cares? Like it. So that's one where we would disagree, for example.
Okay, so let me pick up on that. I don't think I said that there aren't things we need to change, right? And sin is an Aramaic, right? And its original form, sin, just means separation.
Hmm.
So what does that mean? Well, if we are one with God and there is no separation, then it's a sin to say or do anything that leads you or others to believe that they're not part of that oneness. That's a sin. It just means you're thinking in separately, right? And that means that you are going to treat people like they are external from you, not a part of you. So then you will start to think that I'm going to do something to somebody or someone did something to me. But if you understand you're part of the same oneness, then you're probably less likely to do something to somebody else because you recognize you're really doing it to yourself and how you make them feel is going to come back to you. Now, they call that karma, right? Not as a punishment, but so you can understand how that feels because it's through that experience you'll understand, right? So, um, so I absolutely believe that we sin. We're born into sin because we're born into the illusion of separation, right? That we're all separate from each other. And that causes havoc, right? So, whether it's because you believe that you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or you're a Christian or a Muslim, look at the world, right? It just messes us up. So I think we'll come to at some point, and I'm not going to say it's next week or next month, but I do believe at some point we're going to drop all that and we're going to realize that we all are spirits having a human experience in our own way. And just as you said so beautifully, we're not going to agree on everything. It's okay, but we can have a conversation about it and we can learn from each other and grow together. And if you want to celebrate and worship one way, and I want to worship a different way, and our friend over here wants to do it a different way, so what? That's great. You know, I think the most important thing is you have faith, right? One way or another. And what I've seen, um, Dale, is that very often it's antics. It's just words, right? In other words, people say it's universe. Well, I call that Jesus, right? Or I call that God. Okay, it's just a different word, right? It means the same. So let's not get caught up in the words. Let's focus on what they mean and how we live them.
Hey, I wanted to respond to your thing about sin, but I guess the first thing to just kind of understand and get straight here is what if it's not just semantics? Like what if it is important, these distinctions? What if there is one true religion? And I would say, I spent 8 years as a general theist, so I was not a believer, and I went through an investigation process, kind of studying the evidences for at least the major world religions, kind of thing. Not obviously there's too many religions to go through, but at least I've come to the conclusion that yeah, Christianity is actually true. It is the one true religion, kind of thing. So I'm just, if that's true, I know you don't believe that, but if that is true, if there is one way, like, wouldn't it be important for us to identify that and try our best to find it?
Well, let's go back to what you said about separate sin, right? So we're all sinners because we all think, no, most people think that a sin
Sorry,
is
sorry to try.
something.
It's hard to hear. You're a little bit low
Oh,
on the
okay. So
volume.
is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh,
There you go.
okay, good. All right. Thank you for pointing that out. So, um, again, a sin is doing something wrong. So what if that thing you're doing wrong is believing that you're separate from somebody? You couldn't do it if you didn't, if you didn't believe you were separate and you thought you were hurting somebody else or someone was attacking you, right? That's a sin. But it really means because you, in order to do that, you have to believe that you are separate from that person, from that thing. But if you recognize that you're not, kind of like what I was saying about semantics. You can be a Christian and be an Iranian, right? And you can speak the language of, probably not a good example, right? But you could speak Chinese, right? A word differently. There's no comparison. But what it means to you is the same thing. So, what I'm saying is, all the religions, every single one of them at their core says the same thing. What happens is religions then become dogmatic. And people say, and initially this happened because the people who first understood these religions and beliefs wanted you to understand you had to believe this way because there was no other way. They were wrong, but they lived in one corner of the earth and they never traveled around the world to hear that other people believe the same thing, but just using different words, right? But the core beliefs, like gravity, were exactly the same, right? So we got to love one another. We got to be kind. We want to be kind. We want to be grateful for what we have. Um, and we want to spread the words of love and kindness. They all say exactly the same thing. But what happens is because in order to try and get people to believe it in their language and their words, they created fear-based ideas. If you don't believe this way, you're going to go to hell. And then you're going to go to purgatory or damnation. That is just not true. That is just not true. It's designed to get people to be afraid. And then what happens if you don't do that? God is going to punish you. God's never going to punish you. What kind of God would that be, right? But that's what people are told. And then they're told that God wrote a book. Why would God need to write a book? God has no need to write a book. And then why would say the only way you can get into heaven is you find this book and you read it and you understand it and live it as it's written when God can communicate with you anytime. God doesn't need a book to communicate with you. And what if somebody just doesn't find the book? They're going to go to hell? It doesn't make any sense, right? How is that an unconditionally loving God, right? Now, that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of things in the Bible that are truths, right? It doesn't mean they're not, right? It just means, but it's not the only way. If God created only one way, that wouldn't be much of a God, right? God creates so many ways that you can't miss. You cannot miss. God is there all the time, and you will find your way home. That's my belief. Again, I don't know.
No,
I
no.
haven't written a book about it either, right?
Yeah, so that's what I, because you've made a lot of truth claim assertions there, very, very emphatically. So I just a couple questions for you, and then I do want to address the sin because you raised the fair point. So I
Yeah, sure.
want to respond to it for you. But so when you're making these truth assertions that the core of all the religions is the same, the religious, it's called religious pluralism, and when I studied it in philosophy, then that's the position of philosophers like John Hick, and he's respectable and stuff like that. Or then there is no universal one way or the highway type thing. Do you think these are objective truths on your part, or are these again just relative? Like in your opinion, there's no thing like, yeah, or is this an objective truth? Do you think?
Okay, so give me an example.
Well, so for example, is it true in the same way that the Earth is not flat, that all the religions really teach the same thing, and teachings about Christian exclusivism are false? Is that an objective truth in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. And
So when you said a second ago, right, there was one thing you said at the beginning. What was it you said at the beginning of your thing there? What did I ask you about? Did I ask? Oh, I said, give me one objective.
yeah. So okay, let me put it this way. Here's a Bible quote. You would disagree with this, and I would agree with it. Jesus is the only way, truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through Jesus.
Okay. So
Yeah,
Jesus is the Son of God. It is the Son, right? So what is the Son? It's the light and the way. We cannot live without the Son. Everything would just die, right? So the Son is the light and the way, right? It's not a person. And that person is not going to come and save everybody on earth, right? So that's my belief, right? So you believe that he is someone who's going to come and save the earth. Okay, great. But if you look it's semantics, really. Why does it really matter if it's a person or if it's that we can understand and know that that was what was meant by I am the light and the way. The son did not need to be birthed by a mother. So it's a virgin birth, right? And the sun goes through phases of when it dies in the sky and is resurrected. So whatever you want to talk about in the Bible is in the stars so that we don't have to find it anywhere. It's already written for us, right? And the ancients understood that. They understood the times, the seasons, the equinox, uh, all those things are uh, are written in the stars, right? So and nature, stars are nature, right? So we are a part of nature, right? So all the elements of the earth are in our body: gold, silver, uh, platinum, lithium. All those things are part of who we are because our bodies are made of, right? Dust to dust. Our bodies will go back to the earth. Our spirit is eternal, right? It never dies because it's energy. We're energy, and you cannot destroy energy. If you change the structure of water, if you make it colder, it's going to become ice. If you put it under temperature, it's going to turn into steam. But the actual energy just transforms as we transform, right?
yeah. Within a closed system of the universe under natural law, kind of thing. I would agree with that kind of. But okay. Well, here's a great thing to bring in the sin, and let me see what your thoughts are because you said something very interesting, and so great. The Aramaic for sin means separation, and bang on. Great job for doing your homework. I appreciate it. That was awesome. And I would agree, but I think your issue was the problem is that this misunderstanding, this illusion of ontological separation, as it were. And here's the thing: that separation, that in biblical terms, in Christian Bible, it's not an ontological separation. We aren't ontologically separated from God in the sense that He continues to sustain my existence and all human beings' existence and that sort of thing. What sin does is it creates a relational separation between us and God. So there's a breach in the relationship caused by me doing harm to that other person or something like that. And by the way, it's possible to sin against oneself, and that causes a breach and damage to us as well. So this is why, from a Christian point of view, Jesus is so important as a person. He's not the Son; he's the son, as a title, the Son of God, the Son of Man, and he is a person, and he has to undergo the punishment for that sin in order to bring about a personal reconciliation. Um, so I think that's how I would kind of address sin is looking at a relational separation, and the fix for that, you need a person to be involved in repairing that damage. So does that help at all? Yeah, any thoughts on that?
For sure, yeah. So I'm a typical guy. I can't multitask, right? So when you're going through all those things,
Oh,
I
sorry.
forget. No, no, it's okay. I'm making a joke of it, right? So, um, okay, so sin. All right. One of the things that came up in my mind, Dale, and I don't know if this is necessarily exactly in alignment with what you're saying, But one of the challenges that we face as humanity is this idea that our religion is the only way.
Mhm.
And once you have that belief, all you're going to get is war. You're only ever going to have war.
Is
Because if
war.
everybody believes theirs is the only way, they're going to be fighting you literally with bombs and soldiers because you're telling them that what they believe isn't true and they're going to resist that and they're going to fight, right? So, and that's why it comes when I say it comes back to this is what is true for me. This is what you believe. Nothing wrong with it, right? But what I don't think is a good idea is to say there's only one way to get to God, and I've got the right way, and you are wrong. You know, this is why why wars are very often created by religion. It's not intentional, but it's because people believe so strongly in the way they believe is the one and only way, they will die for that. And so will people on the other side. And this is what creates conflict. It's not the only thing that creates conflict, right? But, you know, is the biggest thing now, right? It's gone because what does money become? Money has become man's God, right?
True. Bible says as well, right? Mammon can't be.
People worship money, man. I mean, it's horrible to say, it's sad, but it's true. It's an
It
objective
is.
truth. You look around the world, all the wars that are going on, and you know, the governments say, oh, it's because we care about the people. You don't care about the people. You care about the money because if you cared about the people truthfully, then you would stop the atrocities that are going on in every country in the world. No oil, or there is no resources that you need, right? So this is what people do to manipulate the mass, to control them, to do their bidding, but their bidding is designed to give them more power, which is money, right? So that they can have a bigger say in what goes on in the entire world. People are trying to be God, right? At the very top, yeah? And they think, they believe that they're the best person to be that God because they know better than everybody else. It's the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, like I guess I would just come back and say that you're absolutely correct. That in history, religion has played, at the very least, a partial role, and in some cases, I'm sure maybe even a full causal role in bringing about violence, war, even short of that, just feelings of superiority or arrogance and hatred towards others. So that's true. But the reverse has also been true, depending on the religion in question as well. And so I just wanted to say it's not a necessary consequence of exclusivist thinking that comes about. And to put it on the other end, because I could make the same argument about your view of religious pluralism. Um, some of the most intolerant people are people preaching tolerance. They, so uh,
That's so true.
yeah, yes, there are, adverse effects from each of the worldviews, and I think it's important that we don't tarnish the worldview itself based on how people have abused that system, if it makes sense, kind of thing, right?
Makes perfect sense, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. If I did mean to infer that everybody who has a particular religion and believes a certain way is out there to kill people who don't believe the same thing. I believe the vast majority of people in any religion are peaceful, right? It's the people that really don't really practice their religion or even believe in it, that want money, power, and control that distort the whole thing, right? And unfortunately, they are the people that have the power to create the military, they countries. But I believe that the vast majority of people on earth don't want any of that. They don't want to go to war. They don't want to hurt anybody. They want to live in peace and harmony. So I agree with you. Unfortunately, it's the very small percentage of people that hijack religion, right? Hijack it. You know, so like you and I having this conversation here, we're calm. We're open to listening to each other's ideas. We're not in dogma, right? We're listening. I believe this way, and here's why, and I believe this way, and here's why, and we're listening to each other. This is what it should be like, right? This is how it should be. There just aren't enough people that can do this because they are so ingrained in these divisive ideas, right? That cause us to, you can't go on social media. I mean, it's just ridiculous. People call each other terrible names. I'm going to come over to your house and I'm going to kill you. That's insane. That's insanity, right? So
Yeah.
we've got to aim on the side and be fine with how we believe. There's nothing wrong with what and how you believe, but allow the same grace to other people.
Yeah, I think allowing the same grace, absolutely. Like, yeah, in terms of me myself, I am pretty conservative in my beliefs. I don't know if you would call that dogmatic or something. Like I believe I'm an exclusivist, so I do believe Christianity is the only way through salvation and that sort of thing. But I respect you. I respect others who are unbelievers as I'm commanded to do. And I think it's fruitful to have discussions and even consider because number one, it is possible I'm wrong. And number two, even if I'm right, it's still possible to learn things from other people. I've adopted ideas from Hinduism as a Christian that, they have the four yogas. I consider myself a Raja yoga. I like to approach God through the intellect and stuff like that. So that's a helpful way of framing it. As a Christian, I'm commanded to take every thought captive and serve it. So yeah, I think that we agree that when people take it, whether you're an exclusivist or a pluralist or an inclusivist, whatever you are, it's the people that are abusing the system or the views to twist it in a way that they weren't intended to be. That's the problem. So I think we are on the same page more or less on that front. So that's great. And
Even atheists, right? They're not really atheists, right? So let me explain why.
hmm,
And when you get a Bible, it's the Bible of the living God, right? Living,
sorry, it's
live.
hard to hear again.
Oh, I'm sorry. So they say that this is the Bible of the living God, right?
Right. Yeah.
God is alive, right? God is living. Where? Everywhere, right? So even if you may not believe in a particular religion, usually because you've had a bad experience with certain people in that religion or the dogma or whatever. But if you say to them, well, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in life? Sure, then you believe in God because God is life, right?
Mhm.
You don't have to believe in a particular way if you don't choose to, but you can't really say you don't believe in God. I mean, look at everything around you. Where did you come from? Right? And they go, well, it was the Big Bang. Okay. So that's like saying that, you know, um, I'm trying to think of a good thing to use as an
It's similar
analogy.
to Paul.
You think of something that's made, that it was made because of an explosion. Oh yeah. Oh, so books, right? So you're telling me that books came from an explosion in a book factory, right?
Yeah,
No, right? There's no way that could happen, right? So there
absolutely.
is, whether you want to call it God, whether you want to call it Buddha, you want to call it Allah, whatever you want to call it. Bill, Sid, right? There is a force, and I called it a force before, which I know it just doesn't sit well with you a little bit. Um, but God is a force. Can we agree on that? There's the force that God has that brings to us as human beings. So
He has the
you
power. Yeah.
can't really say that you're an atheist. It's just that you don't necessarily believe the way everybody else believes, and that's okay too.
Should say that. That's fascinating. Yeah, because that's I know a certain I used to have an atheist co-host, so he would be shaking his fist
I
at me.
heard that, right? I was listening to your podcast, like, yeah. But you see, the thing is this, we're all different, right?
Uh-huh.
So you're kind of a blend, right? So you are analytical, you're very intelligent, and you think things through. And some people are very emotional, right? And so they just feel their way through.
Right.
Neither is right or wrong, right? It's just different. The gentleman that you're referring to, and I forgot his name, and I apologize, that you had on the podcast that I was listening to, is much more intellectual, living from the mind. He needs science, he needs physical proof. Nothing wrong with that either, right? Nothing wrong with it, right? So it's just a different way of looking at the world. That's when I say it's just semantics, right? It's just semantics, right? We're just saying words that we interpret to mean a certain thing. Once you get into words and you get into language, you're in trouble, right? Because people interpret the words so much differently, right? So some people say, I'm a man of faith. What does that mean? It means I'm a Catholic. Well, wait a minute. There's other faiths too, right? So my belief is that faith is an action. It's not a word, right? You've got to act out of faith. What does that mean? It means that you recognize that there's a God, a higher power, whatever it is, that's got you, right? And in order to move forward, you can't necessarily know, see what is going to happen, but you have a faith that tells you it's the right way to go. This
Interesting.
is the
Very
right thing to believe, the right thing to do, right? And my perception is only you and God know what is right for you.
okay. Okay.
Nobody should tell you that, right? They've never lived in your shoes, but God has, right? All the way, right? Footprints in the sand, right? God's there the whole time. But who else has walked with you your entire life? So who are they to tell you? And you've mentioned this as well. Have a personal relationship with God. And you have that, and you make that the most important thing in your life, you're moving in the right direction, right?
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, all right. Well, I did want to kind of give you a fair shot. So obviously, in terms of discussing apologetics and that sort of thing, I wanted, in terms of our differences with the pluralist and exclusivist, I wanted to start with, let's look at the possibility that I'm wrong and that you're right about the pluralist position. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Like, what do you think would be good reasons to believe in that? And I think you've kind of hinted that for you, it's not necessarily empirical evidence or something like that. It is based, I think you called it intuition or something like that. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. What all would do you think would be considerations to that would make me go, you know what? Yeah, maybe Christianity isn't the only way. Maybe it's just one path among many. Yeah, what would you say there?
I have no reason to want to change that, Dale. I'm not, I'm not trying to change anybody. Your religious and spiritual beliefs are working for you. Why change it? You don't need to change it, right? It makes you happy. It gives you principles to live by, right? So I don't think anybody should have the intention of changing someone's beliefs unless they ask, right? Unless they say, "Can you help me not believe this anymore? I believe that putting my hand in the fire and leaving it there for half an hour is good for me. Let's chat about that. Let's just talk about that for a minute. That might not be in your best interest, right? But I'm
Okay.
not I'm not about changing anybody. I respect
Wait,
all religions, man. Um,
okay.
the only
That,
thing that I think we get, and I've said this earlier, where we get into trouble is dogma, right?
mhm.
And believing or even spreading the word that this is the only way and everybody else deserves to die, right? Or, this is the only way and everybody else out there is an infidel or whatever it is. That doesn't help anybody, right? It doesn't help anything, right? Uh, but having conversations like this, I feel, helps everybody.
I'm just kind of curious because you and I both agreed against. So forget about me. You're happy with me being still a Christian exclusivist and that. But
Mhm.
what about the Christian or Muslim or Hindu exclusivist who we agree they're a problem? Like they're using their religion to spread hatred and violence and wars. Would you have something that you would offer them reasons to try and change their mind, or are you saying no? I wouldn't even try to change them either.
That's a great question. So, um, so what I say to people is, look, God doesn't put fear-based ideas in your mind.
Okay.
God is love, right? So, is what you believe a loving thought or a fear based thought? And if it's a fear based thought that you have to attack, hurt anybody or anything, that is not coming from God. That is not coming from love. And you've lost the plot, right? So, um, now, is that going to solve the problem? Probably not. But the more people hear it and the more people that live it, the better for us all, right? Um, I mean, you say, well, let's be realistic, Stephen. If I go out and tell everybody that, that's not going to change the world right away. I agree. It's not going to change the world right away. But in the end, it will
Gotcha.
because
Gotcha.
more people will adapt that, right? And then you create a revolution which means, by the way, returning back to where you are, that will be something that will create peace, you know. But it won't happen overnight. It's going to take a while. You know, I heard a story. Well, I think you probably know a little about the Buddhist tradition, and they get up every morning and they pray at least 100 times, and they kneel down and they do all that. And people say, "What's the point in that?" Right? Well, because they understood that every thought and prayer has an effect, right? You know that as a Christian, right? You say prayers and you pray for people. You have prayer groups, right?
Yep.
It makes a difference. You've seen, I'm sure, evidence over and over again, right?
There's double-blind prayer studies all over the place.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, right? And so they understood that thousands of years ago. And so while, people you say, well, they're up in the Himalayas, how's that going to help, right? Because it was sending that thought out that ultimately affects the whole world, right? Now, that's slow, right? But it worked. And there's an old prophecy that said, when those who wear the red robes roam the earth, it will be a sign of great positive change. Well, now you can go anywhere in the world, and there's all shows. The Buddhists come into town. They do their singing, they do their chanting, they play on those amazing instruments. They create these beautiful sand mandalas, right? And you're just looking at it in awe. And then what do we do with it? They go and chuck it in the river, right? You go, whoa! I could have taken that home. What are you doing, right? But
Yeah,
it's saying that nothing is forever, right? And not to be attached to things. You got to let go, no matter how beautiful it is, no matter how much you love something, it's going to come and go. And you have to be able to let it go because that's how life works. So, again, so we can learn from our different religions. It doesn't mean we have to believe exactly the same way. We go, oh, that's pretty good to think about. I don't necessarily need to be attached to everything. Sometimes in life, things will be taken away, not as a punishment, but to get you to see if you can't handle it, that you are attached to that and you can't take it with you, right? Rich man, eye the
definitely.
needle, right?
Yeah,
It's saying the same thing. You can't take your belongings with you, right? And so
absolutely.
don't be so attached to them.
Okay. All right. Great. So, okay. So I want to ask you this then, just kind of flipping the script. And I know we're at the hour mark, so I'll try to wrap up within the next 10 minutes for you. But I'm just kind of curious. So let's flip the script. Let's pretend I'm right that Christianity is the only way, and it turns out, unbeknownst to you, you were wrong. Um, I'm kind of curious because I know you came to your current beliefs through intuition, and I actually accept the validity. Part of the reason I'm a Christian is based on subjective evidence. What you're calling intuition, I would call a properly basic belief kind of thing, right? So I accept that as potentially valid evidence. But I'm just kind of curious if I were to present you with objective evidence, right? Historical, scientific, or whatever, that did kind of suggest that Christianity is exclusively the one true religion. Would you be open to changing your mind, or is your intuitional evidence so strong that no matter what the outside evidence is, like you've got the truth there? Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I didn't come to it through intuition, right? I've started to learn how to use my intuition, but that's not easy, right? So your intuition is like a fine musical instrument. So imagine you were going to try and learn how to play the violin, right? You're probably going to get some of the notes mixed up, right? And you might make misinterpretations of what they mean, right? So I have come to the spiritual beliefs that I have. I have a PhD in spiritual counseling. So I went to school, right? And I learned about these things from a scientific and intellectual point of view as well. So it's a combination of things, right? Um, Now, was I skewed in that way? Maybe, yeah, But I don't want you to think that I'm saying the way you believe is wrong and that I'm right. You could absolutely be right. Absolutely. We got plenty of evidence to show that you could be right. I would just say, no, not you specifically, because I don't think you're dogmatic and I don't think you would go to war and I don't think you'd hurt anybody, right? So, but there are some people that would, based on believing that their way is the only way. That's all I'm saying. Doesn't mean you can't believe that your way is the only way. I would encourage you not to tell everybody else that your way is the only way, because you're probably going to get a lot of conflict that you're not looking for, right? That you don't need to have. And I don't think you need to convince anybody. I mean, I think Christians tend, I mean, I work with a company, right? that is a Christian-based company. And they are what they call a BAM. What is a BAM? It's a business as a ministry, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
every event we do, we pray, right? And we pray in the name of Jesus, right? So we do all those things. I'm not going to say, well, I'm never going to say Jesus. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? It's making sure that your intention is to serve the greater good, right? And that when you are explaining what you believe and how you believe it and why, you're not trying to hurt anybody. You're trying to help, right? And there are people that are going to be drawn to that that need that. They need that sense of community. They need that sense of family. They need that sense they're connected to other human beings who believe the same things that they do. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. You and I are just talking here, and that's why I said at the beginning, I think a lot of it is semantics, right? And we don't want to get stuck in the words. We want to get stuck in the feeling of how it feels and if it feels right for you. Um, excuse me. Um, so people say, well, I'm a Muslim and I saw this miracle happen to this person and
Right.
they believed in, Allah. So obviously God is on the side of Muslims. Right? And every religion can say that, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's what causes confusion as well. I can prove that my religion is right because of these miracles, right? And I'm not discounting the miracles and I'm not discounting that God was involved. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when that miracle was happening, God didn't say, come here, I did this because you're a Muslim, right?
Um,
Or I did this because you're a Christian. Those things happen no matter what. And then when good things happen, people will say, oh, this is because God is on my side. Well, what about all the things that happened that weren't good? Was God not involved there too? Does that mean God doesn't love you, right? So I believe, again, belief, I believe that we have an all-loving, omnipotent, unconditional loving God. Loves us all. They're like your children, right? You put your kids in the back garden. So one of those kids is going to hurt another kid, right? They're going to do something. You're going to be outrageous, right? But you love them all, right? You love the one that got hurt. And you love the one that hurt them, right? Yeah. So
Yep.
that's me.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, I really like I think what you said makes a lot of sense. And believe it or not, I also differentiate. There are different types of miracles, right? So that there are
Mm,
miracles of compassion. God
mhm.
heals atheists at the sight of Lord's, or he'll heal Muslims and stuff like that. And if they're so I don't think his purpose is to authenticate a given religion. And
Right.
I have a friend, Caleb Jackson, who disagrees with me. He thinks miracle healings can prove Christianity and stuff. But
Right.
the thing I think that is important is that I do think some miracles are within a religion authenticating context. They do actually serve to authenticate a religion. And in the Christian case, obviously the ultimate proof is the resurrection. And that's what Jesus himself says. If I wasn't raised, Christianity's BS. You're still in your sins. It's a false religion. Follow something else. But this is what verifies my message, my religious message. So I'm just kind of curious. Have you ever considered the historical evidence for the resurrection from scholars like Gary Habermas or Mike Licona? And what's your take on the Shroud of Turin?
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're getting deep here. Um,
If you've looked into it, I don't want to
Yeah,
put you on
yeah,
the
I
spot.
have. Yeah, right. So we're going to probably have a disagreement here. There is absolutely no empirical evidence that Jesus ever lived, right? There is no empirical evidence that the cloud, what is it, the cloud of, not the cloud.
Sorry, no empirical evidence that Jesus what?
There's
It's
no
hard to hear.
empirical, there is no, I'm sorry again. Yeah, I'm leaning back in my chair. I'm too relaxed. So anyway, so there is no empirical evidence that I have found, and I've looked hard, that Jesus ever lived. Doesn't mean he didn't, right? I'm just saying that I've never seen any empirical evidence, or the cloud of Turin was worn by Jesus. I mean, obviously the cloud of Turin is there. I mean, we know, right?
Yeah,
But
it's enough.
was it worn by Jesus? There's no real evidence to prove that, right? Not that I'm big into proof anyway. To me, it doesn't really matter, right? If you want to believe that and that enriches you, I'm all for it, right? So, but I've never seen any, and you could say the same thing about my beliefs. You could say, well, hold a second. Jesus is the Son of God, so is the Son. Prove it, right? And I'm going to go, I can't prove that, right? I could be absolutely wrong about that, right? No question, right? It just happens to follow some logical things, but that doesn't mean it's true either. Because as you know, things can seem logical and then get blown out of the water, right? The fact that the Earth was considered flat for a long time seemed to make sense to a lot of people, right? And the fact that regular physics seemed to make sense a lot of time until we found about quantum physics, and then you go, oh well, all that just flew out the window, right? So just like you, I'm saying, look, I'm open, if you can show me something that will change my book, I'm absolutely open to it. I'm not attached to any of that. What I am attached to is finding a way to bring peace, bring peace, and to create a world where we're never going to agree on everything, right? And we're going to have fights, but make them verbal, right? Let's not hurt anybody as a result, right? And you might not speak to your friend for 2 months. Okay, not a big deal, right? You know what I mean? Uh, so
Absolutely.
we're
Yeah,
always going to have conflict of some kind, and that's healthy. Just like you said, having this discussion is healthy, right? We're having a discussion, we're sharing views, and we're going, okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, right? I'm
absolutely.
gonna take that and I'm gonna apply it, right? And
Yes,
that's what it's all about. We learn from each other, right? You can't be
absolutely.
an island, and I don't agree with saying this is what I believe, and I'm never gonna change my mind, right?
Right, right.
And then you stay in the past, right? You stay in the past.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I said, I converted my faith. I was only I was 53.14. I'm a weirdo in that I actually calculated it out for the religions, but I was 53% convinced, and I converted to Christ on that basis. So that means there's a 47% chance that I was wrong. So you
Yeah,
still need to be a real seeker and open if the evidence if you gain new evidence that changes your mind, God wants you to follow that evidence. So I agree, and unless you've got 100% knowledge of something, you know like for 1 + 1 = 2, I'm not open-minded to changing my mind for that. But other things, we have degrees of knowledge. So I like what you said there. And yeah, I like that you are open-minded on your end. And hopefully you don't mind. Maybe off screen, I'll send you an email with some sources just for you to check out in your own time. And if you have any sources you want to send me to check out, I'll look at that as well. But yeah, other than that, I think we've kind of covered everything. But just as my guest, I just want to ask you, is there anything that I haven't asked you that? I'm a horrible host. I apologize for, but yeah, is there anything that, any things about your book or any things that are important to you that you want my audience to know about that we haven't talked about yet?
okay. Um, I'm a little reticent because, the book is very explicit, right? It's not a book that you would probably put on sale in a Christian church for sure, right? So I
Okay.
want to warn your audience, number one, you may not be open to that. And I totally understand that. I'm not offended in any way, shape, or form, right? In fact, I have a warning at the beginning of the book. It's kind of done tongue in cheek, but it says, there's a lot of it, there's explicit sex in here. Now, not on every page, right? And it's certainly not the main part of the book, but it is in the book. And, there's also profane language, right? So if that thing offends you, then definitely don't get the book, right? Um, it's about a toxic relationship in the real world we live in. Now, what does that mean? Well, some Christians don't live in a world where people use profane language. That's great. Okay, you don't have to. It is kind of part of our culture though now, right? So if you're gonna, it's gonna be hard to watch television or a movie without it being in there at some point, right?
Great.
So, but that's number one. Number two is if people are interested in learning more about the book, I think I've sent you a link that people can actually use the link and get a free copy of the first 3 pages of the book, right? Which will give you a sense if you do want to go any further, right?
Is it three
And then
pages, or I thought I was told 3 chapters?
3 chapters. Did I say 3 pages? I'm
Yeah,
sorry, 3 chapters. Yeah, the first first 3 pages. That would be a little short. First 3 chapters. Thank you for correcting me on that. And then I do coaching. I do counseling. I have a PhD in spiritual counseling. So I can talk about a lot of things, right? But relationships, how not to get in a toxic relationship in the first place, how to get out of a toxic relationship, right? And how to make sure you never get in one again. Having been through it, I know the signs, right? I don't know what to do, what not to do. And I also counsel people on a lot of other things too. So I've sent you a link. If anybody would like to spend 30 minutes with me just to get a sense of if this is something they would be interested in going through with me, it's complimentary. So we can get to know each other a little bit better and talk specifically about your challenges. My website is vft23.com, and you can learn all about our mission, our vision, our purpose. We want to bring community about where people can share without shame, without guilt, who they are, and some of the things that maybe they've carried with them all their life. And that was one of the reasons I put it all in a book, Dale, to say, look, this guy's got a PhD in spiritual counseling. He spent 20 years in the personal development, and he still screwed this up, right? He still got into a toxic relationship. So if I'm in a toxic relationship, it's not that bad, right? And the fact that I put it all into a book and owned it, my hope is that it inspires other people to feel, hey, maybe I can do the same. And I can look at myself, heal those things, and have a life of freedom that I didn't have when I was keeping it all a secret and holding on to it because of shame. It's a major release, you know.
Yeah, I would just say for any Christians in my audience. So again, I don't know everything in there and that sort of thing in terms of the book. I thank you for giving that warning, but just to the Christians, remember we in even in the Bible we do have the Song of Solomon, which is also quite explicit, and this is inspired scripture. So it is possible to glean edifying information from it. I'm assuming it's not outright just pornographic or anything like that, but still, even with explicit, there could be some insights to be gleaned, and there's stuff like that even in the scripture. So I just wanted to be fair there. So yeah, thank.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, yeah. It's not for everybody, right? It's okay. And I came on the show today to have the conversation we had. And I'm not attached to if we sell any books or any counseling sessions. Whatever happens is fine. And I've really
Awesome.
enjoyed talking to you. You
Same here.
are you are an anomaly, right? A lot of people are stuck in the dogma. They won't listen to other people, and that's the shame. It's not to be shamed, but it's a shame. It's a tragedy, right?
I totally
Because they're
agree.
missing out on a potential friendship, relationship, and understandings that might just add, not designed to take you away from your beliefs, but maybe just add something in there that makes it more, fuller or more interesting to you, right?
Absolutely.
So I
Yeah.
want
Well,
to
that's
thank you for having me on, man. It takes courage to do that, man, to bring somebody you don't know in front of your audience. You've spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, put a lot of passion into what you are doing, and and you should be protective of that, protective of your audience, right? To make sure that nobody's going to manipulate them or share things that are going to cause them to not feel confident in their faith.
absolutely. Yeah, well said. And ditto. I'm very appreciative of you coming on to, again, I don't just have Christians in my audience. I have all walks and stuff like that, but there are definitely a lot of Christians. So I appreciate you coming into the lion's den, so to speak, and engaging me. It was an awesome conversation.
Thank you. Well, you made it easy, man. So thank you for that.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, just so you guys know, you're not done with me today because I have another podcast coming on at 7 o'clock tonight with Dr. Tony Costa. And that topic's going to be on biblical archaeology. So that's the next show. That'll be live streamed. So tune in tonight and have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.